Alright guys, what's going on? It's Carnage Defense bringing you another video today, and in today's video I wanted to talk to you guys about red dots versus iron sights. This debate is very popular because it is pretty much 50-50 in terms of people that believe in red dots only or iron sights only or both, which is the perfect world. But a lot of people don't know whether or not to switch to red dots, or they just don't want to give it the time of day. So I did a little bit of research and I also came up with my own pros and cons of both. And then I'm going to give you guys my thoughts at the end of the video to basically tell you, in my opinion, which one is going to be better. First, before we get into all that, let me know down below in the comments if you guys are team red dot or team iron sight. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the pros of iron sights. So really the most important thing when it comes to iron sights is reliability. Iron sights are reliable. There's no question about that. The other good thing about iron sights is that they don't require any maintenance besides maybe just the occasional tightening once they start working themselves loose. But think about it. They don't have batteries. They don't really need to be cleaned a whole lot. Iron sights, they just work. Also, iron sights, they come on almost every single gun that you buy. So in terms of that, they're low cost. And they're basically free. They come with the gun. So you don't have to go and spend $350 right off the bat to get sights. It already comes with it. You can start shooting it right away. In terms of colors on the front sight, you can get all sorts of different colors. There's green, there's yellow, there's orange, there's red. You can get anything. There's white. You can black it out. It's up to you. There are so many different ways to customize how you want your iron sights. It's just nice to have. And then not to mention, there's also different heights. So in terms of what you need for iron sights, if you don't like the OEM ones that came on your gun, odds are is that you can get aftermarket ones that are just better. And they're not that expensive. They're about 150 bucks at the top end. And I'm sure you can spend more, but for the most part, that covers almost every gun and every sight. The other good thing about iron sights is that they're lighter than a red dot. No question about it. It's just you don't have that large chunk of metal sitting on your gun. They're already there. So in terms of iron sights, there's a lot of pros to consider on iron sights. They're just reliable. Now, with that said, there is some cons, so let's cover that. One of the biggest things about iron sights for a lot of especially new shooters is that iron sights are harder to learn than a red dot. I'll admit, when I first started shooting, iron sights were not my favorite thing. I was not that accurate with them. I was just not very good with them. Once I learned them and I got better with them and used them more, I became much more accurate, but it took me a little bit to get that. So for new shooters, iron sights are not exactly the easiest thing to learn. And I already talked about this one, but they may lose zero and they may fall off. If you're not watching your iron sights while you're shooting, they could eventually just loosen up and fall off. The other thing is that these sights, they're hard to adjust. Once you put new ones on your gun, you have to go ahead and re-zero them, meaning you have to take it to the range, tap the sights back and forth to get it exactly where you want it. And that takes a little bit more effort than it does on a red dot. On a red dot, you click a button. So as far as zeroing the sights goes, it's a little bit more difficult. And then a lot of guns don't come with night sights. So if you're not exactly a gun savvy kind of person, you just bought a gun and you went to go shoot it, maybe say during the night for whatever reason, I don't know. But you may realize that you can't see your sights in the dark. That is something that is a con. And then the other thing is that shooting out at longer distances, it's a little bit more challenging with iron sights. Red dots are much easier for that. Especially if your iron sights are closer together, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. If they're farther apart, it's a little bit easier, but still, with iron sights, it's pretty challenging. So that pretty much covers the pros and cons of iron sights. If I missed any, let me know down below in the comments. Now, let's talk about red dots. I'm going to go ahead and talk about the pros of red dots first. I may have already covered some of these, but I'm just going to go ahead and say them anyways. I may have covered some of these, but I'm just going to go ahead and say them anyways. Red dots, they're just faster to shoot. And then the other nice thing about red dots is that you can shoot with both eyes open. So you can stay target focused, both eyes open, and keep shooting. And because it's just a dot and that's all that you really have to make sure is that the dot lands where you want it, in terms of shooting, you can just shoot it faster. And then for beginners, red dots are just easier to learn. You don't have to worry about lining up the sights. You just have to put the dot where you want it, pull the trigger. It's that simple. And then personally, I can definitely shoot much farther out with a red dot than I can iron sights. So that is also a pro. The other good thing about red dots is that when you're aiming at a target and you're aiming dead center, you can see more area of the target through the glass. And when you're doing that with iron sights, you're not able to actually see below a certain point with the iron sights because the sights and the gun are just blocking the target versus the dot. You can actually see more. I hope that makes sense. That's a weird way to word it, but I hope that that makes sense. The other nice thing about red dots is that you have different reticle options, different reticle sizes, and different reticle styles. Meaning, if you want just a dot, you can get that. If you want a dot and a 32 MOA circle around it, you can get that. If you want a chevron, which is the V, you can get that. Do you want a red dot, green dot, blue dot, yellow dot? You can get all those. It's personal preference. So in terms of your eyes, you should be able to pick up the dot faster because it's set up specifically for you. And then, like I said earlier, red dots, they're just easier to zero. You have your little windage and elevation adjustments that you just get a little flathead screwdriver for. You twist it back and forth, dial it in exactly where you want it, and you're good to go. There are a lot of pros to red dots, but there's definitely a lot of cons. So let's talk about it. The biggest one and the biggest reason why not a lot of people choose to carry a red dot is because they can fail. You have several points of failure on a red dot. If your red dot has screws, which it does, it can fail. If your red dot has a battery, which it does, it can fail. There are so many failure points on a red dot that while they are reliable, they also have more areas to fail than iron sights do. It's also cover maintenance. Maintenance on red dots, they're very easy, but a lot of people tend to forget about them. Your red dot may have a 50,000 hour battery life, but that's on the lowest setting. What setting are you running it on? Are you running it on the highest setting? You may have to change out your battery once a year or once every 2 years. The question is that when you go to pick up that gun and when you need it, that dot isn't on because you forgot to change out the battery. That's kind of a problem. So the question is that do you want to see how long your battery lasts for, or do you just want to change it out on a routinely basis? Also, if you're using a red dot outside and it may not be waterproof, if you get water on it, your red dot can fail. The other thing about optics is that if you are using them a lot, you're going to end up probably dropping it at some point. So if you drop an optic, depending on how fragile it is, you could break the glass on it. You could break the housing. You could loosen something up internally on the circuit board on it. At that point, it's not going to work. The other thing about red dots is that they are very expensive. Now, there are some red dots that are budget friendly, like $100 to $200, and those ones are cheap, but you get what you pay for. If you want a good quality, reliable optic, you're going to end up spending a lot more than $200. Personally, I'm a big fan of Holosun, and those are typically the ones that I go for, but I'm not using my guns in a professional aspect. I'm not a police officer. I'm not in the military. I'm nothing like that. So for me, Holosun gets the job done. If you are in an instance where you rely on your gun professionally, you're probably going to be looking at a much more expensive optic to suit your needs. Trijicon, Aimpoint, SIG, something along those lines. And those optics are very expensive. We're talking $500 easy. So the cost of red dots is very expensive. So that is definitely a con. And then on some guns, you will require an adapter plate. And the moment that you put an adapter plate on it, you'll probably lose your ability to co-witness, which means co-witness means is that you can basically see your iron sights through your red dot. So when you're aiming at a target, you can see your iron sights and your red dot be on the same exact spot. So depending on what red dot you get for your gun, you may end up losing your co-witness option, and that is something to consider for sure. And in my opinion, that's a con because you will end up needing a co-witness option if your optic fails, which it could. And then another one that is super, super obvious, they're just bulky. They're heavy. A lot of optics are shaped like freaking mailboxes, and they're heavy. So that will end up affecting potentially the reliability of your gun because that is weight that you're getting on that slide. And when that slide comes back, that weight may end up messing up the overall function of the gun, and it may not chamber that next round, or it may jam. It may have a malfunction, and that's something that you don't want. And then depending on how often you use your red dot or when you use it or where, you may end up running into a scenario where you can't see through the glass because of maybe lint, hair, maybe mud, water, you name it. You may not be able to look through the glass when you need it most. And the other thing is that since it is a red dot, the worst case scenario, and I really hope that this doesn't happen because it sucks when it does, you may end up losing zero on your optic entirely, meaning that when you sight it in your gun and you're just shooting it one day, the optic could fail and you could lose zero completely and you can never get it to zero again. So you're out all that money and an optic. There are a lot of cons when it comes to optics, and I'm kind of going through it quickly, but if I talked for 5 minutes on every single point, this is going to be a long video. But I'm just kind of showing you guys like there are a lot of pros and cons to both of them. But what's the best of both worlds? The best of both worlds is having that co-witness option. Finding that dot that works perfectly with your gun where you have a reliable optic and you can see the dot, but also you can see your iron sights through it as well. You have best of both worlds. If your optic fails, your iron sights are your backup. So hands down, if that is a route that you can go, that is the best way to go. Now, personally, not a lot of my guns co-witness, and that's something that I definitely need to work on, but I don't use my guns in a professional aspect. They're just range toys. Now, on the other hand, I do actually carry quite a few of my guns. Those ones there have a reliable optic that I trust with a fresh battery in them, so I trust them. But I will admit I do need to get iron sights for some of my guns so I can actually co-witness. That's something that I need to work on, and I'm getting there. Obviously, no matter what you end up putting on your gun, there are going to be issues with it. In the end of the day, that's just how it goes. Things fail. It's like a vehicle. No matter how reliable of a vehicle you get, things can still go wrong. So with that said, I can definitely see the point of why people don't carry a red dot on their carry gun, because in the event when they need it, that red dot could fail. So in theory, yes, the iron sights are more reliable, but even iron sights can still fail too. For me personally, I haven't had that many bad experiences with red dots. For the most part, they've been very reliable for me. So I haven't had an instance where when I go to use that gun, whether it's at the range or whatever, when I go to use it, the dot isn't working. That rarely happens. And the biggest thing to make sure that doesn't happen to you is to make sure that you buy a quality optic. I will say that the Vortex Defender CCW that I had, I bought it brand new, and 2 months after I bought it, the battery already died. While the Holosons that I have, I think on one of these Holosons, I've owned it for 3 years. I haven't changed out the battery at all in it, which I need to, but it's still working. It's still going strong. Now, I don't carry that gun, but that goes to show you that a quality optic will have a better battery life. So let me know what your thoughts are down below in the comments. Are you team iron sight or are you team red dot? Personally, I'm a big fan of red dot, but I think the best of both worlds is to have that co-witness option, if that is something that you can do. If you can't do that, which one are you going to prioritize, iron sight or red dot? I think even for me, I'm still going red dot. I just tend to shoot it better. I'm more accurate with it. I just tend to be a little bit better with red dots than I am iron sights. But with that said, I can shoot iron sights just fine. In the end of the day, choose whatever works best for you, but a lot of people tend to go very 50-50. They either carry a red dot or they're not willing to bet their life on a red dot. If you bet your life on a red dot, make sure that it is a good quality red dot by a name brand company with a very good warranty. I cannot stress that enough. Again, let me know what your thoughts are down below in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. I greatly appreciate it. It's Carnage Defense. I'll see you guys in the next one.